I think the best storytellers and the best speakers on stages, they give a next step to their audience. And so they don't want to just leave their audience with this feel good emotions and this new knowledge. Well, now we have to take action on what we've just experienced and learned.
People have a fear of public speaking, and you have a concept called, well, you described it as destroying speaker anxiety, PSC, prepare, share, and care. Can you explain that and just help us just get rid of this anxiety coming on stage?
hmm So the anxiety usually comes from not preparing enough of your content and your skill set before you get on the stage. So an anxious person usually doesn't feel prepared.
Jesse Cruz is the driving force behind Merge Worldwide, a business and movement to help experts, leaders, and entrepreneurs tell their stories to grow their impact and income. He's also a best-selling author, facilitator of masterminds and retreats, and passionate about showing his clients how to grow their public speaking and business all on their terms. If you're wanting to grow as a speaker, just getting started, or here to learn how to tell stories that will grow your business, you're in the right place. Enjoy the show. Honor to have you here, Jesse. Thank you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
100%. So I'm going to jump right in with what may be a hard question or it may be an easy question. We'll find out. But as I was going through your Facebook, you have a very bold statement on there. It says that you're the world's #1 speaking coach. And I'm real curious how we quantify that or how you came to know that as true.
I think that you have to believe it first. And so I think before anyone can actually be the number one in any industry, they have to first believe that they are capable enough to become that. And so for me, it's like I want to believe that I am the best because if I tell myself that I'm the best, I'm going to show up the best. I'm going to put in all my effort, my energy, and attention into people that I serve. So consistently, I have to tell myself that and remind myself that this is what I continuously strive for, become, and achieve, and will have. And for me, that's how you become the best at anything. You must first believe that you can and will be.
So it's a way to reinforce that, but also kind of hold yourself accountable to show up as your best self. Is that kind of what we're taking from that?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, now that we know that, let's go into a little bit of your business, like how so we get a more understanding of you and your background. How long have you been doing this?
Well, my first time ever speaking was in 2014. I was speaking at a correctional facility. I was volunteering there for like 2 years straight. And so that was my first experience with, doing some speaking. That's where it started.
And what were you talking to those inmates about?
Yeah, so that I was doing the Sunday morning chapel service, so had a faith-based approach in the message.
Okay. Okay. And what got you interested in the idea of public speaking? Was it something that you found through your religion, or was it another avenue? You're like, you know what? I want to get into this, and I know that this is going to be the best way to start.
I think it took off a little bit more after I wrote my first book in 2019. And then people were asking me, well, hey, will you come speak and talk about your book? And I was just like, I mean, I guess I didn't have no interest in doing that. I just wanted to write books and people leave me alone. That's what I really wanted. But I knew if I wanted to get the book out to more people, I would have to take a serious interest in learning my communication and public speaking skills so I can impact more people. And so the book was the catalyst that launched me closer to wanting to take this idea of speaking more seriously.
Mm, mm. And did you find when you were out there promoting the book and talking about it that people started naturally just coming up to you and asking like, "Hey, how did you start speaking? How did you get so good at this?" Did that start happening?
Yeah, so people would come up to me and then ask me questions. And then I was like, well, I guess I could probably teach people how to do this because I've invested into, conferences and courses and coaching myself because I wanted to, sharpen my skills as much as possible. And then I would, present on stage and then that would help people in the audience and they would ask me, how do I do this? And I was like, well, I guess I should probably add this to, my business model, being able to coach people on how to tell effective stories from stage.
And when did you officially start doing that?
So the speaking was 2014, and then the book was 2019. And then I actually got back into the speaking from the book. And then in 2021 is when I started the coaching.
Okay. All right. Then we're sitting now at almost the end of 2024. Do you have any idea how many people you've been able to reach and help with, becoming a better public speaker?
I mean, I could give a rough estimate as far as formally trained. I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's over 100. But as far as people like generically that have been in, the rooms where I've spoken at of coaching and training on public speaking, I mean, it's well over 10,000.
Wow. That's impressive, man. Really impressive, especially in that short span of time. I'm even more excited now to dig into your skill set and your insights. So let's get into this. And of course, we're going to frame it in the idea that we're talking to entrepreneurs, people that are 2 to 5 years into their business. They're looking to scale, they're looking to grow, and they're thinking maybe they can use public speaking to help them do this, but they've never done it before. They're maybe kind of afraid of it actually getting up on stage or maybe even getting on camera. So let's start setting the stage with that. In order to tell a compelling story, you have to develop the character. You have to make sure that your audience connects with this character. Now, when we're talking about a business owner wanting to do this, does it necessarily have to be them themselves as the character? Or how do we start building that compelling character?
Yeah, I mean, it can be the person themselves or it can be somebody else. I mean, truthfully, I believe the best stories are going to be about the speaker, right? So if I'm presenting on a stage, I believe the story that will connect with the audience the most is a story about myself, but it's not really for me. So when you're building a story, you want to make it about yourself only to the point where you make it personal, vulnerable, and relatable. And you want to use universal emotions and challenges such as fear, worry, anxiety, anger, sadness, and you want the audience to be able to see themselves in your story. So, although I'm telling a story about me, the story really isn't about me. It's just my experience, and I'm crafting a story that the audience feels that they have personally lived themselves.
So we have the story that obviously is focused on the speaker. They go up there and they're relaying their story, but they're using a universal concept. Like you said, fear, loss, whatever, something that everybody's experienced. And is that, in your content, you talk about a conflict that's universal. Is that what you're referring to?
Because I mean, everybody has some sort of conflict or challenge they have faced. But if you get up on stage and you focus all the attention and energy on your unique and specific conflict, the audience can't necessarily relate. So, for example, I'll get vulnerable right here, right now. Is if I go on a stage and I say, here, who by a show of hands have ever lost a child? Maybe a few hands go up. Maybe. If I go up on stage and I say, by a show of hands, how many people have ever lost someone that they love? Almost every hand goes up because almost everybody has lost someone they love. So now I've built a relationship because I've built a connection. Rather than focusing on my unique personal struggles, I focus on what's a common struggle to most people in the room so most people can relate.
So in the vein of, again, coming back to the entrepreneur being on stage and speaking, um, unless there's something like maybe a grief counselor or something like that, the idea of losing a loved one, I don't think would be the best one to start off with. But let's say, for example, you have, you have a coach, right, that specifically helps people with anxiety, right? So that's the person up on stage. They just wrote a book. Um, would we just go with the low hanging fruit? Who here has struggled with anxiety? Or is there something more compelling that we could do with that?
Yeah, that's what's called a universal question, right? And so you're just asking a generic question. I gave you an example earlier of just a question that can be used. Obviously, the question always needs to be tailored to the specific audience. So depending on the setting, depending on the audience, there's that question I ask is not going to be a question I necessarily ask at a room full of maybe entrepreneurs. It'd probably be a room full of people who have I know that are in grief, bereavement counseling, things like that. So that would be more of the setting for that. So rather than maybe doing a universal question, you just tell a compelling story of something that you lived that relates to the idea. If someone it's anxiety, then you would tell a story essentially about when you felt most anxious in your life. And then you would get into the three-step process on how you got out of that anxiety.
Right. Right. And that leads directly into the next thing that I wanted to touch on, which is you talk about a conclusion that can be resolved by the time your story is over. So this is where you're telling the solution or a solution, or starting to lead them down the path of getting out of whatever struggle that they're in, right?
I think the best storytellers and the best speakers on stages, they give a next step to their audience. And so they don't want to just leave their audience with these feel good emotions and this new knowledge. Well, now we have to take action on what we've just experienced and learned during our time together. So the call to action is essentially your offer or your solution. That could be, buying your book, that could be listening to, subscribing to my, you know, YouTuber podcast. It could be going to my event. It could be hiring me for coaching. That solution needs to be something that's connected with the story and the content and the conclusion of your speech.
100%. And so now that we've got this entrepreneur, they understand their ability to connect with an audience and how to kind of start thinking about that, thinking about getting onto the stage. That in turn brings up a whole nother thing. Speaking about anxiety, fear. People have a fear of public speaking, and you have a concept called uh, well, you described it as destroying speaker anxiety, and there were a few things that it's PSC: prepare, share, and care. Can you explain that and just help us just get rid of this anxiety coming on stage?
hmm So the anxiety usually comes from not preparing enough of your content and your skill set before you get on the stage. So an anxious person usually doesn't feel prepared for what is about to happen. And so to minimize the anxiousness and destroy that, that person would have to consistently prepare for their message, and then being able to also share that with people around you who can give you great feedback, who can tell you that this makes sense, and sharing your message out with full confidence and belief, not going and bringing nervous, anxious energy to the stage and to the presentation. And it's to care enough about yourself and care enough about your mission and your message to the fact that you would be more anxious not being on the stage, because you know how you'd actually be hurting people by not giving them this relevant information. And so, although a lot of times people say they have anxiety with speaking and they have fear of speaking, it's really not the fear of speaking, it's the fear of people's opinions about your speaking. But you'll care a lot less about what they think if you follow that framework.
Excellent. And so, breaking down that framework a little bit more, when we think about preparing, what are some good techniques or good practices that people can deploy to help them properly prepare?
Well, first, I go through the pay method, PAY. First problem that you solve. If you don't know the problem that you're solving when you're presenting, it's going to probably create anxiety because you're all over the place trying to do 10 things at once, and there's not clarity and there's not focus. And so once you get clarity and focus on identifying the specific problem that you would like to solve, that's where you want to spend your preparation time. How do you solve this problem? And then the next is the audience that you serve. Who is this audience? Tell me about them. What are their dreams? What are their desires? What is their pain? What is their problem? And really focus on them and care about them and be interested in them and getting results for them. And the last is the letter Y, which is quite literally the word why. Because once you focus on why you're doing what you're doing, that anxiousness will go away because it's not even about you. Because usually our whys are attached to a greater mission. Usually it's attached to a person, a cause that's bigger than ourselves. And if you can prepare that way with the problem that you solve, the audience that you serve, and then why you're doing this to begin with, that you'll be more confident when you're up on that stage.
Excellent. And thinking about that in just the more practical sense of actually being up there and knowing what you're going to say, how you're going to solve this problem. I've been in public theater for many years, and one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to learn lines, you've got to memorize, and I think that would be super valuable for anybody that's going to be getting up on stage and speaking, is having at least a degree of memorization that's been involved in what you're wanting to talk about. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so it's a fine line, and people say this a lot. So I think a speaker should, definitely practice consistently. And the problem is if they're too rehearsed, it sounds robotic and not
Mm.
authentic. So it's having certain parts of the speech memorized and then giving yourself flexibility to, almost improv and tweak and add things as you see fit and as the spirit moves and the energy and attention of that room being able to put things in. So although I know exactly what I'm going to say before I get on a stage, there's always things that I say that I did not plan for because I felt in that moment that this would be a good place to add this in.
And speaking of going with the moment and being able to have that adaptability, I'm wondering, just do you think that it's distracting at all? Some speakers, they like to have PowerPoints and displays behind them as they talk. Do you think that that's distracting, or is it better to be just the lone person on stage and they're only paying attention to you? Like, any thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. You can ask a lot of people to give you a variety of different answers. I will say it really honestly depends. Most of my presentations, I don't use PowerPoint or slide or anything like that. It's just not for me. But that doesn't mean that it's, my way is the best way. It's just what works for me. I think that a lot of times speakers can depend too much on the technology and the screen behind them. And I think that can take away from some of their skill development and it can be a distraction. And so if you're going to, use slides, then I would just use a minimal amount of slides and not fill it up with like an encyclopedia on a slide. Cause sometimes speakers are putting paragraphs and I'm just like, why would you do that? Now we're reading a book. So we should just gave us a book and not got on stage. We could have just done that and saved everyone some time. So it's just it really depends on the approach of the speaker. I think it can be a distraction if it's just not done effectively with overloading too much content onto your audience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And that is something I've gone through speaker training myself, and that is definitely one thing that they mentioned, is using slides and do not overload them with information. Just some can be just as simple as a picture, just to cue you as, oh, this is what I'm talking about next when I see this picture that relates to, this bullet point, whatever. Yeah, definitely want to keep it as simple as possible if you're going to use that. Great points. Now, thinking about the sharing portion of how to prepare and get your speech and your message out, you mentioned sharing it with people to get feedback. That way, you've got real world discussion happening and you can modify things, tweak things here and there. What people should we be sharing this with? Should they be close to the audience that we're going to be speaking to? Should this be our just friends and family, or who should we be sharing this with?
I mean, that's going to depend a lot on the speaker as well. So if a speaker is brand new, they may not even know where to begin, right? And so if a speaker is just brand new and they're just trying to get out there, they may just have to start with their family and friends. Me personally, I think family and friends probably give terrible advice. I just do. I mean, so later on, I would say the first person you need to run it by your coach. Like hire a coach that you can share your message with. Have your coach who's hopefully in a similar industry as you, right? If you're trying to be a better speaker, Run it by your speaking coach. That's probably the first person you can get feedback that way. Get feedback from your peers, other people that are in the speaking industry. Could be, someone in the publishing industry, could be someone in the event space, booking agents. Just try to run it back with people in your network who have similar interests to you. Because one mistake that I made early on, I was seeking feedback from people who had no interest in public speaking, and I was taking their opinion as the truth when they knew nothing about the space at all. And I think a lot of people, they seek out opinions from family and friends, but your family and friends don't care, they at all, right? And they may love you, but they have no reason that they should ever be giving you advice on public speaking, because they've never done it. They don't care about it. They're not interested in it. And so I'd say ask people who are skilled in that area, and take that feedback into consideration.
Yep. Very good points. I mean, I think we've all experienced that as entrepreneurs, right? We've told our friends and family, or they ask us, "Hey, what is it that you do?" And start explaining it, and you can just watch their eyes just start to glaze over because they don't get it. They don't care. Oh, and you're right. It's not that they don't care about you. It's just the fact it's like, well, yeah, you're not interested. It'd be like talking to me about the history of the Civil War. It's like, yeah, just I don't care. I don't care at all. And so thinking about caring and mindset, that actually brings me to the third level of what we were just talking about, the whole care portion. Caring more about the message and the people that you serve versus how you're delivering it, and that boosting your ability to communicate and get your points across. But that delves into mindset. So obviously you want to have a connection and care about what we're talking about, right? But how can we deepen that level of caring so we can start working past that anxiety?
It's a great question. It's being able to understand that this is how I frame it. If I don't share this message, if I don't speak up, I'm hurting people that I care about. And I just don't want to live like that. And I think a speaker needs to have that level of conviction in their message, to the point where they're like, if I don't share it, who is? Like, who's going to be the one? And who's going to be the one to speak up? Who's going to be the one to inspire, to impact, to transform? And it's our responsibility, and no one can do it for us. And I think when it comes to really caring, it's really thinking about the people. It's having a deep conviction in what you say is so important that when you go to speak, you believe that lives will be changed forever. I look at it as if you believe you had the cure for cancer, how many people you telling? You're telling everybody. Why? Because you know it works. You know it helps. You know it's going to save lives and make a difference. And that's how I look at it when I'm speaking. It's like there's people, they're dying from something, from fear, from worry, from loss, from being broke, from their marriage and their business. There's something that's slowly killing them inside, a pain point, a struggle. And if I don't get up on that stage, that piece of them is going to continue to eat away at them until there's no purpose left in their life. And I think about that person before I go to speak.
Jesse, that was incredible. That is so powerful. I love the way that you framed that. I love the way that you look at that, because that level of commitment, you're right. It's absolutely necessary. If you're going to be a person up there on stage speaking, trying to change people's lives. And I think that even that level of thought, it also works when, that speaker, that entrepreneur, they're just sitting behind the computer trying to figure out what to type, what to say, or how to reframe this so that it's more powerful, that it hits home better. That's hard work too. Like, that takes a lot of mental energy and dedication. And I think what you just shared would help people with that too. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Now that we've got good practices. We know how to start setting up these characters and being able to relay information to the audience. Now we want to talk about some mistakes that people commonly make when they're speaking. And I know you speak about this often. You have the acronym ACE to help us out with that. So, kind of take us through the ACE acronym and what are these common mistakes that we can now avoid because you're here?
There's so many. I'm just going to share a story because this was something that I see commonly. A speaker will get on stage and they have just quite literally been introduced, right? Their name, where they're from, all their background. They'll get on the stage, it's their time to speak, and they get up there and they do a second introduction. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? Like, you were just introduced. Like, quite literally, you were just introduced. And for me, I'm just like, you wasted valuable time because in the very first 7 seconds, the audience is deciding on if they're going to listen to you or not. And so the very first thing when a speaker is speaking on stage, it needs to be something compelling. I call it the hook.
Mm-hmm.
You got to get the attention. You get the attention of the audience, you're going to do amazing, most likely in your presentation. But that attention happens right in the beginning. So you must have attention that grabs them, that holds them, it gets them to lean in and be curious and want more. They don't need you to come in there and say, hey, my name is, hey, the weather's nice. How's everybody doing out there? Who's having a great time? Like, they don't need all that small talk. I do that some other time. How am I getting their attention? Right from the beginning. It's a question I got asked before I get on stage. How am I getting attention? That's got to be the key thing.
I'm assuming that goes back to the main problem that you're trying to solve, or the opening question that you mentioned to form that connection. Is that, are we talking about the same thing here?
It can be. It can be directly related. You can capture attention by, using that universal question we talked about earlier. It could be sharing a staggering statistic. It could be leveraging a very famous quote with a unique perspective, or it could just be the very first line of your story that captures them and gets them invested into what you're going to say next.
Okay, I like that, the first line of the story idea, because I think you could use that, or use the uh, like the outcome of the story as the hook. Have you seen that? Have people done that before? Just to
What
be
do you mean?
like, okay, so you have this story. Let's say the speaker, he went on this hike, right? And it was the hike from hell that ended up transforming the way that he thought about this certain subject, right? So he's on this hike and it's a journey, right? And he comes across this, this rattlesnake, and he was like, how did my life change after being bitten by this rattlesnake out in the middle of nowhere? With something like that, obviously, we could frame it better and figure all that stuff out later, but that's the whole idea. It's like, you got bit by what, in where? Okay, how'd you get out?
The greatest day of my life was when a rattlesnake bit me. Boom. Attention captured immediately because it's so unique and so different than what anyone's ever heard. They'd be like, wait, what? What does that even mean? And then they're going to lean in. Because why would something so bad, a rattlesnake biting you, turning out to be the best day of your life? Well, I don't know. Let me unpack the story for you as to what happened after I got bit that changed my life forever. And then you would continue to unfold the story.
Yep, that's it. That's the hook right there. And it's that juxtaposition, I think, that makes it so strong. Like you were saying, how can something so, what we perceive as negative, end up being so positive? And it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, we want to lean in. We want to figure out how, why, huh? Yep, absolutely. Okay, let's dive into the idea of content here. Because in your ACE acronym, the audience is the first one. We want to connect. We already talked about that. The next is the content. So How is there a logical way that we can construct the content so that we make sure that we are teaching, that we are providing value, or we're giving somebody the roadmap that they can actually conceptualize and follow? Is there a way, a best practices way to construct that?
So I'll just give a couple pointers on that. Number one, when you are teaching content, I think 3 steps is the most effective. That doesn't mean if you do two, it's wrong, or 4 or 5 that it's wrong. I just believe three is easier for the brain to remember. So I think three is will be a great way to outline your content. A bonus tip on that is if you can have an acronym for it, like what we're talking about right now, ACE, or if they all start with the same letter, right? So if it was AAA, could be uh, action, activate, adaptability. It's easier for the audience to remember, and they don't have to use a lot of bandwidth trying to remember and figure it out. So I think if you're using 3 key points and they can spell out a word or they start with the same letter, I think it's an easier digestible way to teach content for your audience.
Yep, I would absolutely agree with that. And you can think of it in syllables as well. Like when we're thinking about like logos or catchphrases from companies, the easiest ones to remember, the one that comes to mind right now is it's gotta be tied. You know, one, two, three syllables. It's gotta be tied. You know, that's so yeah. If $1 million companies are using that 1, 2, 3 structure, yeah, it would definitely make sense to use it in the speech as well. 100%. All right. So we know we've got to connect, we've got to give them something of value, teach them, tell them a roadmap, but then we've got to give them the next step. We got to engage. And, you mentioned that as the call to action or the thing that they need to do next. Why is that so important?
It's so important is because it lets them know that they're more important than your 60-minute speaking slot, that you thought more about their problem than maybe they did, that you provided a solution or alternative and a resource that when they leave this room, they can actually do something that will help improve their quality of life. And a speech is important and it's very impactful. However, I think it takes more than that to really get the results that the speaker is looking to achieve. And so it's engaging the audience by challenging them. You're telling them to step up and to take action. And as mentioned before, on the family and friends thing, usually in family and friends, they can, because they love us, they let us slide in our mediocrity and they tolerate us being average because they just, they don't want to hurt our feelings. Whereas a speaker, I think that they love you enough to say, you're a great person, but let's become even greater. And I care too much about you to let you stay the same. Let's follow this plan of action together to get you to the next phase of life where you really want to be. That's why engaging the audience into a next step, a call to action, is so important.
And it goes right back, and you said it goes right back to the word care about what you're doing and your message and your audience. Yeah, I love it. Love it how we just tied that right back up. Nice little bow. Great job.
Thank you.
All right. So, obviously, speaking on stage is one avenue that you can utilize this skill set to bring more people more value and obviously grow your business. But where else can this idea of or the skill of public speaking, where else can this be used?
I mean, there really isn't an area it can't be used, but you can use it, you know, if you're married, you can use it with your children. You can use it, if you have a job and you're talking with your boss, you can use it anytime you're socializing with people. Learning the skill of how to communicate effectively is going to improve the quality of your relationships because usually the quality of a relationship is reflected in the quality of the communication of that relationship. And if you want to have better relationships, learn more communication skills.
I love it. There's no limit because we talk to each other all the time. So as long as you can construct a compelling story, argument, however you want to frame it, you can utilize this skill set in any area of your life. Perfect. Perfect. And you talked about vulnerability earlier. I believe that vulnerability is not a weakness, it is a strength, and that it can bring connection and community to you and draw you in. Would you agree with that?
I think vulnerability is a superpower.
So that would be a yes.
Most definitely,
Absolutely.
yes.
All right. And when we think about getting up on stage and being vulnerable, sometimes that doesn't feel good. That doesn't seem like it's anything that we want to do because we're embarrassed, or we're just scared of people knowing this thing about us. And I was reading through your content. You have this idea of business owners spending more time promoting their costume versus their business. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, I got a lot of hate for that one. Let me tell you what.
Did you?
I had Oh my gosh, you would have thought I said the most controversial thing ever. It had a lot of engagement. So there was a lot of people loving it, but man, I had a lot of people like they were really upset. I was just like, whoa. But I think the reason they were upset is because they didn't understand the context
Mm,
of that post. And so a lot of times what happens on social media, they will read a post and they will just react. Oh, let me just post. And granted, these are my least favorite people are the ones that they have never commented on one single post unless it's something to disagree with me. Right. So like I'll put out all good content and they never comment, never post on anything. And then I put out something they disagree with, and all of a sudden they want to say something. Which I always find that funny. It's like you haven't posted on 700 posts and then you found one you disagreed with and now you're on my page. I always found that very intriguing human behavior. But the reason why I made that post is because I had you know, people complaining to me specifically. My business isn't growing. My business is struggling, and that's part of the business journey and experience. Is going to be ups and downs of being an entrepreneur and building a business. And I was like, okay, I was looking to give them support and coach them, and then I'm like looking at their profile. I'm like, I haven't seen one thing about your business at all. So nobody knows you actually have this business. And this is multiple people, by the way. And I was just like fed up. And I was like, there's multiple people who are complaining to me about not making sales, the business isn't growing. I was like, let's go to your social media page. And they have 27 posts about their Halloween costumes. And all the time and attention, energy, and effort now I'm not against Halloween and doing costumes. That's fine. I don't really care. That's your thing. But if you're going to put more attention and energy into, that holiday that has nothing to do with your business, and, people are like, well, it's personal branding, it's part of their brand. I'm like, yes, you've missed all the context. So, but I don't have time to explain all that to every single person who got mad at me for that post. Yes, personal branding. Yes, talk about your personal life, of course. But it's just like, if your business is ran on social media and you do online business, but your online business has nothing to do with your business, you have a huge problem because the last post for the past few weeks, the only thing they know about you is the haunted house that you went to, where you went trick or treating, and the costume that you have. And if I scroll back for weeks and months, I still see nothing about your business, your online business that's supposed to be promoted on social media. I don't think that you actually take it serious. And that's the reason why the person usually is not getting any results, is because they're just more concerned with, you know, celebrating the holiday, which is perfectly fine, but just don't complain about the business not growing if you're putting your attention and energy into things that are taking away from it.
okay. Now I'm understanding the context behind the word costume. Yeah, that's starting to make much more sense. And you're right. It's amazing how people can not have that distinction of, oh, I don't hardly ever post anything on my business and I wonder why it's not growing. Like, gee, I wonder why that is. But they just don't like to be, they don't like it when people shine a light on that, you know, because obviously they still care. They care enough to get mad at you to comment on your post,
Of course.
but they're just not doing it, to move their own needle forward. Oh, goodness sakes. So speaking of posts and content, where would people go to find out more about you, to get into your world and start seeing more of what you do?
Yeah, the best way is to, connect me on Facebook's Jesse Cruz or Instagram, Jesse Cruz Speaks.
Okay. Very simple, very straightforward. And of course, guys, those links are going to be below. And this is the time of the show now that we just get away from entrepreneurship altogether. And we're just going to mess around and have a little bit of fun. That way you get to know Jesse a little bit better. And I love this question. It's always so fun to see the answers. What is your guilty pleasure, sir?
Oh gosh. I love listening to Justin Bieber. That's my guilty pleasure.
No doubt. Okay. Oh my goodness.
My family, they give me the hardest time. I mean, they make fun of me all the time for it. So, but I'm okay with it. I've learned to accept it. I think he's a great singer, and I like his music.
All right, there you go. There you go. Unapologetic, but interesting nonetheless. And I can understand. I can relate. You know, I have those days where I ask Sirius to play 80s hair metal, so I understand. Oh man. And what is a food that if it was put on your plate, you would just completely turn up your nose and like that's never happening?
A food that I hate, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Um, I don't like olives. That's like I'll eat almost anything. That's like the one food I just don't eat at all.
Yeah. Is it green olives, black olives, or any olives?
Any olives, I just don't like them.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very interesting. And then travel destination. Where is a bucket list travel spot that you have not yet been to?
Now that's one of my favorite questions because I love to travel. We host speaker events all over the world, and so hmm, I would say Switzerland.
Switzerland. Interesting. And why Switzerland?
I just saw the pictures and the videos I've seen of how beautiful it is, and
Mm,
so we'll probably host an event there, 2026. So that's on my list.
perfect. Yeah, I agree. The pictures that I've seen, the videos, they're absolutely beautiful, stunning. It's the same way I feel about Ireland. Just
Have
those.
you never been?
No, never been.
Oh, it's great. Love it there. A lot of fun.
See, there we go. I just got chills. Confirmation.
It's great.
I love it. Well, Jesse, this conversation I know is going to help so many people just break into this world of public speaking, tell better stories, connect with people more. So I can't thank you enough for your time here today, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, you know what to do. Like the show, share this with your network. You never know whose life you can positively impact with just a simple and free share. Go and give Jesse some love, give him a follow, and peace. We'll see you in the next one.